Okay, good morning, everyone. This is Rick Wychik, the director of NAEHS and the NTP. I'm going to welcome you all to day 2, and we'll see if we can maintain the exciting momentum around the science that is being supported by NAEHS. So what I would do in my director's address today is update you on a few of the...
So Rick, before we get into your presentation, can we do the introductions?
Oh, absolutely. David, let me turn it over to you. Do you want to take us through that?
Thanks, Rick. We'll go through and I'll call on council members to do another introduction this morning. Phil Bourne is again out of the country, so I don't believe he's going to be joining us today. Tim Greenemeyer.
Hi, I'm Tim Greenemeyer. I'm a neurologist, neuroscientist at the University of Pittsburgh.
Thank you. Irva Hertzbeck-Kyoto. May not be on yet. Andrei Sholyan.
Andrei Sholyan, University of Montana, respiratory toxicologist.
Daryl Hood.
Hello, Daryl Hood. I am a professor in the Division of Environmental Health Sciences here in the College of Public Health at The Ohio State University, specializing in environmental justice. And I call myself a environmental public health neurotoxicologist, neuroscientist. Thank you.
Thank you, Daryl. Carrie Hornbuckle.
Good morning. I'm Carrie Hornbuckle. I'm a professor of civil and environmental engineering at the University of Iowa and director of the Iowa Superfund Research Program.
Jenny Ingram.
Good morning. I'm Jenny Ingram. I'm an analytical chemist at Northern Arizona University, and I do environmental types of things out on tribal lands.
Thank you. I believe Tom Leveist is not going to be with us. Tom, are you on? Gary Miller.
Hi, Gary Miller. I'm a professor of environmental health sciences at Columbia University, and I'm a neurotoxicologist, and I work on the exposome.
Gökhan Mutlu.
Hi, I'm Gökhan Mutlu from University of Chicago. I'm a professor of medicine and chief of the section of pulmonary and critical care. I'm a pulmonologist. I study the mechanisms by which particulate matter air pollution causes cardiopulmonary events.
Thank you, Gökhan. Patricia Ness Henderson.
Yeah, Dave Bennett. Good morning, everyone. Greetings from the Black Hills of South Dakota. My name is Patricia Henderson, and I work for the Black Hills Center for American Indian Health. And my research focus is primarily on tobacco, both ceremonial and commercial tobacco products within tribal lands. Thank you. And communities.
Thank you, Patricia. Trevor Penning, I just got an email from him that his internet went down, so he may be reconnecting. Trevor, are you on? He will be back with us just shortly. Maria Savasta Kennedy.
Yes, good morning. Maria Savasta Kennedy, clinical professor of law at UNC School of Law, where I teach and research in environmental justice from the legal and community building side. Good to see you all.
And I just got an email from Karen Vasquez that she may not be able to join us. Karen, are you on?
I am here, but I'm in my car outside of the ER. I dropped my daughter off. So I am just listening in because I want to hear the reports, but I am afraid I might lose internet.
Sure. Thanks. I hope everything
Karen,
goes well.
You need to take care of your daughter. That comes first.
She's checked in the ER. So she has a fever of 104. As long as they can get that down, she's fine.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Oh boy. Well, good luck with that.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Trevor. I lost internet connection and I'm now on the phone.
Great. Thank you, Trevor. And then we have our 3 ad hoc members who are in the process of onboarding to council. Steph Cormier. Do we have Steph this morning? Olivier Deschênes.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Olivier Deschênes, a professor of economics at the University of California, Santa Barbara, and I work on the economic effects of climate change and also effects of climate change on health.
Thank you. And Catherine Hoya.
Oh, yes. Good morning, everyone. I'm Catherine Hoyer. I'm an epidemiologist. I'm at NC State University in Raleigh. I work on environmental epigenetics.
Thank you. And then our ex officio representatives from other agencies, Yulia, Carol.
Hi, I'm representing the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, and I am the Associate Director for Science at the Division for Environmental Health Science and Practice.
Andrew Geller.
Good morning. This is Andrew Geller from the Environmental Protection Agency, Office of Research and Development, where I'm a senior science advisor, experimental psychologist, and toxicologist. Thanks.
Thank you. And Susie Fitzpatrick.
Sorry, I've got a bad cold. This is Susie Fitzpatrick, US FDA. I chair FDA's Alternative Methods Work Group and work on alternatives, and also co-chair VicVAM.
Susie. And I neglected yesterday to have members of senior leadership introduce themselves. So Rick obviously has already introduced himself. Trevor.
Good morning. I'm Trevor Archer, the Deputy Director of NAEHS. I'm a chromatin biologist and epigeneticist by training.
Daryl.
Hey, I'm Daryl Zeldin, Scientific Director, DIR. I'm a pulmonary critical care physician. Thanks. Good morning.
Jan? So Jan was breaking up badly there. Jan Hall is our clinical director. Jay.
Good morning, everyone. Jay Mathis. I'm the Associate Director for Management and the Executive Officer.
And Robert.
Good morning. I'm Robert Sills. I'm the Acting Scientific Director of the Division of Translational Toxicology, and my expertise is in neuropathology and molecular carcinogenesis. Thank you.
Thank you. And I do not see Gwen Coleman on.
She's on.
Gwen's got to be here. I just saw her. She's on. She's here on campus. So Gwen, are you're not there?
Can you hear me?
There you
Yes.
I don't know why I don't see you on my participant list. That's weird.
Can you hear me?
Yep. We can
Okay.
see you and we can hear you.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Gwen Coleman. I'm the Director of the Office of Scientific Coordination, Policy, and Evaluation here at NIEHS, and I'm an environmental epidemiologist by training. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Rick.
Okay, well, welcome everyone to day number 2. So I'll start off with giving you a little update on some of the projects that I hope you will find to be very interesting. So let's go to the next slide. Of course, the big question that I'm often asked is, always asked, is what's happening with the budget? And I wish that I'm sorry. Is there a question?
I just had to mute somebody. We're good.
Okay, got it. So I wish I had better news. So and things haven't changed as far as the budget is concerned since I spoke to you last September. So just to remind you that the president's budget came out probably just over slightly less than a year ago. And actually the good news was that the president was proposing an additional $25 million dedicated to climate change and health, although our basic allocation from labor HHS stayed constant at about $914. He also suggested an $83 million flat budget for the Superfund research program. Well, later in the year, again, as I described last September, the Senate was a little bit more generous than the House. They held us flat with labor HHS at $914, flat with the Superfund program at $83. And the House came in flat for the labor HHS at $914, and they cut the Superfund research program, which never just perplexes me, because whenever I'm in front of Congress, and I think it was most recently in front of what we called, well, in front of both the Republicans, the Democrats, the Senate, and the House, there is just overwhelming and strong support for the Superfund program. So I don't know exactly what the motivation was there. But these are the numbers the way they sit right now. And I just want to remind everyone that we don't have a budget yet. We are continuing to, in fact, let's go to the next slide. So we are continuing what we call a continuing resolution. In fact, it was back in, I guess it was January 18th, as I'm sure most of you heard on the news. Congress passed the third continuing resolution, which takes us through March 8th. So what this means is that we can't spend above what we were spending in 2023, which is actually, it looks like it's flat anyway. But we'll have to see what happens on March 8th. So let's hope that Congress can develop some alignments between the House and the Senate, and they can pass a budget, and then we can kind of get on with our lives. So, and I'm hoping that if they don't pass a budget, then we're again facing the possibility of a government shutdown, and we none of us want to do that. So it looks like the best case scenario, at least what I'm hearing from our new NIH director and our deputy director, that flat is good compared to some of the other agencies of the federal government. And furthermore, NAEHS is pretty much mid-pack along with other ICs. Some other ICs are getting more significant cuts, but flat is essentially good. Now, they may be saying that flat is good, but the problem that we all know is that we have increased costs of doing business. Science is more expensive because of inflation and because of new tools and capabilities that we have to actually bring to bear. We heard about some of those things, some of those very exciting new areas of science yesterday in the epitranscriptomics projects. And plus, we all have there are promotions, there are COLAs, other sorts of things that we have to absorb in a flat budget. So it's going to be a challenging year to try to figure out how we can iron all of this out. So stay tuned, and we'll certainly keep you posted. And we've got our fingers crossed that there will not be a government shutdown, that we will have a budget on March 8th. So let's go to the next slide. So probably the biggest news since we've met last September is that we have a new director of the NIH. And I just want to take this opportunity to let you all know how enthusiastic I am about Dr. Monica Bertinelli being named the 17th director of the NIH, and that was back in, November 9th in 2023. I mean, Monica is just terrific. I mean, I had the privilege of actually meeting with her one-on-one soon after she was confirmed, and we talked about quite a number of different things, and she's very supportive of the work that we do. But before I go into the details, just a little bit of background for all of you. She attended the University of Utah Medical School and trained in surgery at the Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston, and was a research fellow in tumor immunology at the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute prior to assuming the role as the director of the NCI. In fact, I got to know Monica when she was the director of the NCI. We talked a lot about the role of the environment as it relates to predisposing to the development of cancer. Now we've kind of extended that conversation to better understanding the role of the environment and the role that genetic background and epigenetic background, all the sorts of things, the exposure and precision environmental health, throwing all of these things into the mix. She's very excited about the work that we're doing at NIEHS. So I also want to take an opportunity to thank Dr. Tabak for his service as the acting director. I mean, Larry stepped in at a very difficult time and provided just outstanding support as the acting director of the NIH. I also want to acknowledge Dr. Tara Schwetz, who stepped in as the acting deputy director. I worked a lot with Tara. I mean, she works long hours, did some pretty remarkable things. So thanks to both of them for their service during the interim, prior to Monica stepping in as the next NIH director. I also want to comment that there's not only support from across the Institute and Center directors and across the NIH for Monica's assuming this role, but I was privileged enough to attend a reception at the US Capitol in the evening of January 31st. So all of the IC directors were there, along with many other senior staff, but most notably, there were Republicans, there were Democrats from the House and the Senate who came to that reception And they were all there enthusiastically, talking about their support for the NIH and their enthusiastic support for Dr. Bertinelli as the next NIH director. So I'm very, very excited about her assuming this role. So let's go to the next slide. So she shared some thoughts with the IC directors. In fact, has been working with the IC directors in powerful new ways. But first of all, I wanted to just note that she is emphasizing collaboration, excellence, harnessing technologies, and promoting trust in science. That's really kind of in a nutshell what Monica Bertinelli is all about. I mean, her core tenet is all about making sure that the discoveries that are generated at the NIH labs, and both the intramural labs and the work that we support in the extramural community, this work in the labs and the clinics, it has to reach all of the communities. I think, as many of you know, she grew up on a cattle ranch, and she was miles away from the local medical facilities, and she kind of felt the effects of not having immediate medical care. So it's a personal passion for her, and it's something that I think is something very well in alignment with our interest at NIEHS around translating the research discoveries that we make and getting it into the communities and into the public health domains. So she is also advocating in a very big way for more collaboration across ICs. So she doesn't like any of the siloing that has actually, quite frankly, has been traditionally a big part of the way the NIH worked. We were 27 institutes and centers that pretty much worked pretty independently. And I think that was true for much of the work that we did at NIEHS, but she is all about advocating for more collaboration. And the exciting thing for me is that when she met with me, she greeted me and just commented on how excited she is about the possibility of getting greater awareness of the role of the environment and the exposome into studying essentially into the fabric of the NIH, into studying the etiology of human disease. So she's very enthusiastic about this. I'm very excited. And also yesterday, she actually put me in touch with some senior leadership in the NSF, talking about taking on more collaborative opportunities with the National Science Foundation. So it's a great working relationship, and I can tell you the IC directors are very enthusiastic. She's also very interested in improving public's confidence in science, which I think is a very important role for the NIH director. And I think she has the personal charisma and the ability, her ability to address Congress, Republicans, Democrats, and seeing the enthusiastic reception. She has this remarkable charisma and remarkable ability to actually get in front of a lay audience and talk about the exciting things that are happening at the National Institutes of Health. So the other thing I'll just comment here is that I was very enthusiastic about her whole approach to managing IC directors' meetings. In the past, these used to be meetings where we would show up and we'd have about an hour and a half or 2 hours of lectures on updates of things that were happening. We take notes, and that was pretty much it. The new format is that the IC directors are very actively engaged with her, making decisions about running how the NIH is run. And furthermore, I was very encouraged that she basically said, look, as far as I'm concerned, there are no big ICs and there are no small ICs. We are all institutes and centers that work collaboratively to make the mission of the NIH happen. So I think that's just a fabulous attitude, that and this whole vision that she's bringing to the NIH is just spot on. So let's go to the next slide. Just moving things along here a little bit, some of the guiding principles of her as the NIH director. It's really getting our scientific discoveries, and our work is not finished until we can impact all people that are and they're living long and healthy lives. It's really getting the work that we do and translating it and getting it into the clinic and into the public health community. And moreover, I think this is really good news for many of us. I think NIEHS has really been at the forefront of community engagement, but she is really articulating the whole notion that if we're going to tackle the most persistent and complex problems, The NIH needs to bring more members of the public into the research enterprise as our partners in discovery. I was very pleased to see the word partner. It's not just getting out there and lecturing to people in the community, it's really partnering with them to help to make the work that we do happen. So again, I'm just very enthusiastic. Let's go to the next slide. So she's also very excited. She's in a relatively short period of time that she's been in office. We started looking at different areas of focus. And one of the things that she's personally passionate about is how do we manage our data? We've got lots of databases across the NIH. We support hundreds of billions of dollars on an annual basis. So how do we structure these databases in a way so that they're the highest quality data and that they can be seamlessly integrated across different spaces and ultimately to use some of the emerging and powerful tools of AI and ML to really harness knowledge from these databases. So it's something that she's personally passionate about. And I think it's also a message that she knows is one that would resonate well with members, our appropriators and members of Congress. So good for her. Next slide. So let me continue on now. I think most of you are aware we've been talking about strategic planning for almost a year now. So let's go to the next slide. I'll just briefly update you on where we are. So as I mentioned in the last two times that I've addressed this with you, we spent a lot of time seeking out input from the global environmental health sciences and biomedical community. So environmental health science is no longer just for environmental health scientists. There's increasing interest across the biomedical spectrum in better understanding how the environment impacts human health and well-being. So we've gathered this input, and Dr. Sheila Newton, who actually retired at the end of January, put together a draft of the strategic plan. Members of senior leadership, including myself, have edited this draft, and we will be circulating that to all members of council shortly for your input. And we'll be then putting this out for public comment soon. We'll collect and compile the comments. Senior leadership and I will take a look at this, and we will finalize the plan. And we hope to have this approved, packaged up, and ready to publish when we meet again in June of 2024. So stay tuned. It's finally maturing to the point where we can share with you some of the details. Next slide. But what you will see is that we've listened to the community, and there are some emerging scientific themes that are part of this new strategic plan. So what I thought I would do today is just go through some of these areas and update you on some of the progress that we've made in these areas. So, and just to recall, it's about climate change and health. What are the health consequences of a changing climate? Precision environmental health, the exposome, mechanistic and translational biology and toxicology, really understanding at the molecular level, how do different environmental exposures actually influence human biology? Also studying environmental justice and health disparities, as well as computational biology and data science. So let me go on now, and let's go to the next slide. So let me take up the issue of environmental justice and health disparities as a topic which we're all very excited and very interested in. Next slide. So it's an area, just to remind all of you, I think NIEHS has been a leader in environmental justice and health disparities research, building on some of the strong foundation that was laid by Dr. Ken Olten, when he was the director of NIEHS. And we've made a lot of progress on this front. And very specifically, the one thing I'm going to highlight, and I'm going to be very brief because you're going to hear a lot more about our programs in environmental justice from Dr. Archer in just a few minutes. Actually, later on this morning. I think it was later this morning. Is that right, Trevor? So he'll be giving us an update on this. But just to remind all of you also that environmental justice is an area of focus for the U.S. government, for HHS, and for the NIH. And it was several months ago, actually, I think it was last summer, that the acting director, Dr. Tabak, and the acting deputy director, Dr. Schwetz, asked Trevor to step up and to provide leadership for an NIH-wide effort to develop plans around environmental justice. And the HHS secretary asked us at the NIH to develop 3 specific things that we wanted to get done in the next 18 months. So Trevor stepped up, put together an NIH-wide working group, and there were 3 different things that they decided that we needed to work on. The first one, again, you're gonna hear the details of this. I just wanted to whet your appetite on this. The first is to kind of refocus the existing centers of excellence in environmental health disparities, the EHDs. So currently, or up until recently, it was a collaboration between NIEHS, NIMHD, and NICHD. But as part of this effort, it's going beyond just health disparities and to integrate a very important component of environmental justice. So it's multidisciplinary research capacity building and community engagement. So again, Trevor will give you the details. And the good news is that it's no longer just NIEHS, NIMHD, and NICHD. So there are other ICs that have signed on. And furthermore, they're putting some skin in the game, which means that they're writing some checks, and we're tossing this in the pot together so there will be more money to support some of these centers. The second is the Environmental Justice Scholars Program. And you may recall that I talked about the Climate Change and Health Scholars Program when we got together last September. And this was all about bringing scholars with diverse expertise in environmental justice, bringing them to the NIH, either virtually or in person for varying periods of time. These could be community leaders, they could be academics, healthcare government workers, but bringing them on campus and then interacting with NIH staff to bring their expertise, their knowledge, and their passions to help to sculpt in the environmental justice programs across the NIH. So that's a major area of focus, and Dr. Archer will tell you more about this, but he will be giving a presentation to the IC directors. So we'll be passing the tin cup to find some additional support. So it doesn't, NIEHS doesn't have to take it on by ourselves. So we're looking for support from across the NIH to support this. Also, the last area is the environmental justice training. We have this phenomenal worker training program. So we'd like to use that as a framework, to get out and to help communities, workers, researchers, healthcare and public health professionals, policymakers, really to build capacity in environmental justice. And we have that framework of the worker training program to help us do that. So next slide. So just again, Trevor's going to give you all the details here just to, kind of whet your appetite here. And actually, it's something I'm personally very excited about. I mentioned to you last time that we have it's a faculty with representation from the different divisions across NIEHS. And the idea is to really get both the director, the deputy director, and other senior leadership out in front of environmental justice communities and to primarily listen to what they have to say. So we've been doing this. In fact, over the last 12 months, I've visited, there was the University of Cincinnati. I visited the environmental justice communities in Cincinnati. Actually, it's very sobering to visit with some of the environmental justice communities in the Houston area. I think I mentioned that the last time we spoke, but more recently, it was last November 30th. We had a listening session. Dr. Archer and I were there together with many of the staff at NIEHS, and it was to listen to the community in Mebane, North Carolina, around their concerns because there is the Western Electric Tar Heel Army missile plant in Burlington, North Carolina. That's been there for decades. And it's this aging structure that is spewing toxic chemicals into the water system, and it's just an eyesore. It's a classic example of an environmental justice community. You have low-income housing abutting this deteriorating facility. So we actually we listened to what they had to say, and one of the things that they were telling us is that, look, Rick. We told your predecessor, we told your predecessor's predecessor, what we need is someone to come in, and we need to clean up our community. We've done a lot of research. We know that there are cancer clusters associated with this facility. We need it cleaned up. So what we discovered is that going in and doing some additional research might be helpful, but what we really need to do is we need to get in there and we need to bring together local government, state government, national government, and get people working collaboratively together in a way that can ultimately clean up the environment. So in fact, we're really looking at NAEHS as a coordinator and a convener, bringing together the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, bringing together the EPA, bringing together other parts of federal government and working collaboratively together, and in fact, ultimately cleaning this place up. So let's go to the next slide. So I'm very pleased to announce, in fact, my wife Janice is actually on one of the distribution lists and noticed, I think it was on, was it Sunday afternoon, that there was an article in one of the local newspapers indicating that in February 2024, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers is going to begin excavating as much as 300 tons of contaminated soil at the Tar Heel Army Missile Plant in Burlington, North Carolina. So it was just a fabulous opportunity to actually get together as a convener, bringing different local, state, and federal government agencies and actually some of the local governments there, and working together to actually develop a plan that will ultimately transform this property. So we'd like to take that model and actually bring it to other environmental justice communities across the United States. And God knows that there are plenty of them. But serving as this convener, I think, is a great model for us going forward. And thanks, where's Andrew? Thanks, Andrew, for your willingness to put together an agenda and bring you and your colleagues at the Environmental Protection Agency together with us to really strategize on what we can do to clean up this site. Next slide. Okay, I also just very quickly want to call to your attention that under Aubrey Miller here in the scope office, working together with Gwen Coleman, has been taking the lead on putting together leadership on this, what we call the DR2, NIH-wide DR2 collaborative program. So there are several ICs across the NIH that are part of the DR2 program, NIEHS, and we can see them here on the slide. And the idea was to actually bring this DR2 program, serve it up and to try to figure out what can we do with the East Palestine train derailment. It's a man-made hazard and a disaster. And there were chemical exposures, physical, mental, social, behavioral health impacts, acute and long-term health impacts. And we needed to learn more about how can we inform healthcare measures and public health interventions to the communities that were impacted by this man-made disaster. So together with the collaborating ICs, and it's really encouraging because, typically in the past, NIEHS did a lot of this on our own. So now we have several other ICs working collaboratively under that collaborative model that Dr. Bertinelli is so excited about. We're working collaboratively together to actually put money together. And we co-funded a 2-day virtual workshop at the National Academy in NASM. That was on November 6th and 7th. And it was really to develop a plan going forward. What is it that the federal government can be doing to address some of the needs that you're listed here for the East Palestine community? So lots of work. So lots of work that still needs to be done. And NIEHS has a plan. We will have an attempt to get some of our R21 grants on the ground here. We hope to be able to make those announcements shortly so that our grantees can actually roll up their sleeves and start doing some work in the East Palestine community. Next slide. So let me move on to the exposome. So next slide. So I think the biggest area here, you'll recall the exposome has been, this has been around in the environmental health sciences community since 2005, when Chris Wilde originally defined the exposome as the totality of exposures over the life course. But as I explained the last few times that we met, we really have to develop an operational definition what does it actually mean to collect data, exposomics data, and how is that different than the data we would collect if we were doing one exposure at a time? So actually, it was really with Gary Miller. So I see Gary is on here someplace, working together with Michelle Bennett, who is someone who has worked at NAEHS a few years ago. But let's go to the next slide. So Gary, whoops, there we are. So Gary really helped to assemble 23 experts on the exposome, and they had a brainstorming session at the Banbury Center. It was December 3rd through the 6th of 2023. Actually, Dr. Belshaw attended and represented NAEHS. But the first step of this in operationalizing the exposome is to define what is the exposome. So again, with these 23 different experts from the US and actually the European Union, so here they started with the original definitions. It's the integrated compilation of all physical, chemical, biological, and psychosocial influences that impact biology. And then there's the common definition. It's a transdisciplinary field aimed at discovery-based understanding of how the exposome influences biology and health. But I think the important thing here that I want to emphasize is we now have an operational definition. It's a field that studies the comprehensive and cumulative effect of physical, chemical, biological, and psychosocial mediators that impact biological systems, and doing this by integrating data from a variety of interdisciplinary methodologies and streams of data to enable discovery-based analyses of environmental influences on health. So Gary, I'm sure will be happy to entertain any questions about this really dramatic Banbury conference. I know actually, David was there too, so they both may be willing to entertain questions you may have. So I think the other thing is the understanding here is that the exposome is not, it's not a single implementation. There is no way to do an exposome experiment. You don't collect all of the exposures. So it's more as I'm understanding it, it's about integrating data from a variety of interdisciplinary methodologies. And it's very specifically contrasted with the one at a time environmental health studies. So anyway, so now we're moving forward. We have a definition, and we can actually apply that to the way that we study the impact of the environment. Next slide. Now, I just want to remind everyone that the approach that we're taking at NAEHS is to support what we're calling the Center for Exposome Research Coordination. So we have now a functional and operational definition, but what we need is a better understanding of how do different laboratories and how do different centers and how do different countries actually work collaboratively together to actually pull together and make the exposome research come alive. So we're actually funding this at $1.55 million per year for 5 years. And the good news, again, is that NAEHS doesn't have to do it on our own. We have these remarkable collaborations. There have been a number of other ICs that have stepped to the plate to co-fund this. NINDS has been very exciting. In fact, it's probably one of the first ICs to really embrace the exposome framework. The National Institute of Aging. Many of you heard the director of NIA at one of our council meetings just well, it was about a year ago. Richard Houdis, NCI. The new director of NCI, very supportive. NIAMS and Lindsay Cresswell is very excited about the exposome. So we're funding this. We hope to be awarding this center sometime in the July and August timeframe. So stay tuned on that. And next slide. And we want to do this in collaboration with the emerging efforts in the exposome that are happening across, outside of the boundaries of the United States. So other major activities that are happening are across Europe. There's actually the European EHEN. So it's the exposome, human exposome. David, what's the acronym again?
It's the International Human Exposome Network.
IHEN, right. Anyway, so they're working on something very similar here, and the idea is that once our center is funded, their center is funded, let's get people sitting at the table and working out the details so that we're working in collaboration and in sync with each other and not competing with each other across international boundaries. So stay tuned. We'll continue to, in fact, many of the individuals that are part of the IHEN effort were actually at the Banbury Center meeting. So next slide. So let me move on to precision environmental health. So next slide. So you'll recall that, and I'm not going to give you all the details, but PEH is all about attempting to begin to understand the variables, the biological variables that are responsible for individual variability to environmental exposures. And as I described last time, PEH is really about G by E by D. So it's genetics and genomics by environment and exposomics by data management. And I explained that the genetics is a complicated part of this because there's no single gene that's responsible for differential responses to environmental exposures. Most of these genetic predispositions and epigenetic predispositions are multigenic, or they're complex traits. So the best way to do this is the environmental health science community doesn't have to do it on our own. We can join forces with some of the very powerful genetics and genomics efforts that are happening across the globe. And one of those very important efforts is the All of Us research program. And I described last September that we've been joining forces with them. There's a lot of enthusiasm and excitement. Jeff Ginsburg, the Chief Medical and Scientific Director of the All of Us program, has been working with us to integrate environmental exposures into the way that they collect data. And this should ultimately allow us to, this should ultimately facilitate the types of robust gene by environment experiments that can really contribute to the PEH program. Next slide. So I just want to point out here that there will be a publication that will be coming out. In fact, I didn't check, maybe it's already out. But there's a Nature Medicine commentary that is co-authored by all of the Institute and Center directors of the NIH. We're all embracing the All of Us program as really a million-person awesome cohort that we can all use to help facilitate the work that we're doing. Next slide. And most notably, one of the big areas of progress over the last several months is that All of Us has awarded $30 million to the University of Colorado to establish what they call the Center for Linkage and Acquisition of Data, or CLAD. So the goal is to expand our understanding of health, increase research utility, aligned with the expectations of consented participants, and increase retention metrics, and to collect clinical data that you can see here. But very exciting for us in the environmental health sciences community is that they are now collecting, they're going to go back and they're going to add residential history and geocodes for the individuals that are part of this cohort. So what this means is that we can then bring some of the powerful tools to correlate to where someone lives with the different climate patterns, or we can connect with the Centers of Disease Control Prevention and Prevention's Environmental Justice Index. So it's a step in the right direction of bringing environmental data into the All of Us cohort. But we have other plans that at some point, maybe the next time that we speak in June, I'll be able to update you on what I call the Phase 3 project, which is to more broadly integrate environmental exposures into the All of Us program. So next slide, please. And this is just to remind everyone, it's the PEH program is not just about collaborating with the All of Us. We also have the PEGS genomic data program here. And that's all about essentially trying to achieve some of the same endpoints that we're looking to achieve by collaborating with the All of Us program, but really about bringing both genetic and epigenetic as well as environmental exposures into estimating personal risk associated with environmental exposure. So that's going very well. Next slide. And I just want to call to everyone's attention, Dr. Hall, who's the clinical director here at NIEHS, Dr. Allison Matziger-Reif, as well as David Fargo and Charles Schmidt for their collaborative efforts to manage the data portions of the PEGS program. Next slide. So let me go on to climate change and health. I'm going to be very brief here because you're going to hear a lot more about this a little bit later on this morning. Ashland, Gwen will be giving you an update on a lot of the progress we've made over the course of the last several months. I just want to point out to all of you that the Executive Committee for Climate Change and Health is it started off with 7 institute and center directors, and our job was to provide executive leadership for a large and engaged and passionate group of investigators across the NIH, really planning strategies for climate change and health. And more recently, what we found is that we've added 4 more institute and center directors, the directors of NIEID, NIA, NIAMS, and director of NCCIH, because they were very interested. They want to roll up their sleeves together with the other members of the executive committee. So lots of excitement, lots of support for the climate change and health program. Next slide. In fact, just in the interest of time, I'm just going to go past this. Ashley is going to cover this. This is essentially the cog diagram that we put together to really illustrate the framework of the research strategy for the climate change and health. So if you're interested, nih.gov/climate and health for some of the details. But again, you will hear all of the details in just a few minutes. Next slide. Again, I'm going to pass over this in the interest of time. So Ashley will take us through the grants that have been awarded and the outreach that we have across the United States. Next slide. And I just want to, again, Ashley will cover this, but I want to just call out as part of the climate change and health, we funded the Research Coordinating Center, the RCC. So the RCC actually put together a virtual, it's called the first annual Cafe on Climate Change and Health Conference. It was February 5th to the 7th. There were panels that discuss funding, community engaged research, data needs, training and data management, a number of roundtable discussions, and it was just noteworthy that there were 1,300 registrants from across the globe. So it clearly points to the engagement. So this is a hot topic area. People are interested in this, and they want to know what they can be doing to work collaboratively to study the health impacts of climate change. Next slide. And just in the interest of time here, I'm going to go through this very quickly, but I think it was Daryl Zeldin, who's our scientific director for the Division of Intramural Research. You recognize that there's a lot of capability that we have within our intramural research program. So he originally proposed, I think it was about a year or so ago, why don't we toss some money to help to get investigators within our intramural research program interested in the topic area of climate change and health. So I'm very pleased to say that at the executive committee meeting that happened a couple of weeks ago, Dr. Zeldin made the case, and it was approved by the executive committee to fund a 3rd round of funding for what they call, what Daryl, I think, and the other scientific directors across the NIH call the Intramural Targeted Climate Change and Health Program, or it's abbreviated. Everything in government has an abbreviation, an acronym, so it's ITCH. So this program, there will be money available to engage other investigators. This is just a cross-section of people who were funded. I think this is the 1st round of funding. And you'll notice here that it's not just NIEHS. This is truly an NIH-wide effort. So I really want to point to Daryl for his leadership to help to make this happen. Next slide. And there's also, Daryl made the case that there are some capabilities that we have here at NIEHS that we would love to know more about some of the physiological effects of increased heat or changes in heat. How do mammals respond to heat changes in heat, both at the genome level, the epigenome, the transcriptome, the proteome. So the idea here, and you got funding to purchase these controlled temperature chambers. So this will be housed at NIEHS in our outstanding animal facility here. But it's an NIH-wide collaborative effort. So the tissues and samples from the animals that are exposed, the rodents that are exposed here at NIEHS will be shared widely across the institutes and centers of the NIH. So again, it's truly an NIH-wide effort. And I really applaud all of the intramural researchers who are engaged in helping to make this happen. Next slide. So it's just as part of this intramural effort, Daryl has proposed, and the executive committee is approved a new center within the intramural research program dedicated to climate change and health. It's will be located here at NIEHS, but it's not a NIEHS-wide center. It's an NIH-wide intramural center. We're actually looking to recruit an established mid-career tenured scientist to provide leadership for that program. So if you're interested, send me an email or send Daryl an email. And we're hoping the search is currently underway, and we're hoping to find someone who can bring that leadership to this intramural program. Now, just as a comment, Congress has very, very specifically specified that no more than 10% of the NIH budget is to be dedicated to the intramural research program. So the executive committee approved it was $3.9 billion budget to help support this new center. So next slide, please. So let me go on to the mechanistic and translational biology and toxicology. So the biggest thing that has happened, next slide. The biggest thing that has happened over the course of the last several months is that the NIH has now announced funding for a new common fund project called Complement Animal Research and Experimentation. And this is all about developing new human-based new approach methodologies, or NAMs. And the general sense is that across the NIH, as well as with the advisory committee to the director, there's a lot of interest in this. These new NAMs will help transform the way that we do basic translational and clinical scientists. So there are a number of different initiatives that are showing here on the slide, all the way from development, new technologies to develop these new approach methodologies. And it's about, a big part is data management. How do we keep track of all the data that we generate as part of this new initiative? So it could be as long as 10 years, and we're proposing anywhere from $35 to $40 million per year. So if you're interested in this new area, stay tuned. There will be funding announcements that will be appearing. Now, one thing I want to just point out here is that complementary, we specifically chose, and in fact, I should also point out that this is a common fund project that's jointly sponsored by NIEHS, and NCATS, and actually Nicole Kleinstrauer in the Division of Translational and Toxicology played a big role in this, as well as Dan Shaughnessy in the NIEHS, and in the Division of Extramural Research and Training. So we brought a lot of our expertise to bear on developing this NIH-wide common fund project, but we're calling it complementary because this is not an attempt to eliminate animal research from biomedical sciences. It's about creating new approach methodologies that complement and actually facilitate the development of data to help to understand human biology. And in our case, or in many cases across the NIH, is to better understand the impact of environmental exposures. So we're pretty excited about this program. So again, stay tuned, and we'll make more information available as it's developed. Next slide. So just a few NIH updates here before I close things out. So next slide. And I'm incredibly excited about announcing that we have a new scientific director of the Division of Translational Toxicology. So Dr. Heather Pattisall will be joining on March 24th, 2024. So that's just over a month from now. She is currently the Associate Dean for Research in the College of Sciences at North Carolina State University. She received her PhD in Population Biology, Ecology, and Evolution from Emory in 2001. And she will bring incredible scientific and managerial capabilities. And she's just a ball of energy, lots of interest in transparency, and has already been interacting with the senior leadership committee here at NIEHS. So we're all very much looking forward to having her join on March 24th. So thank you, Heather, for if you're listening in, which I hope you are. Thank you for your willingness to toss your hat into the ring, and I'm glad that this all worked out. But before I go on, let me also thank the NIEHS DTT staff. It's been a long time since Brian Berridge actually went to the next phase of his life and his career. And then Dr. Sills stepped in, and so thank you, Robert, for your interim leadership to maintain stability within the division. But thanks to all of the staff within DTT for their commitment, their dedication. It was an extended division director vacancy and recruitment period, and I'm very thankful for all of you for your patience and your willingness. And actually, we interviewed 3 top candidates, and the staff and DTT provided lots of input. That was the basis for ultimately, I consulted with our deputy director, Dr. Archer, and ultimately I made the decision to bring Dr. Pattisalt on board. Next slide, please. And actually, just in the interest of time, I'm just going to quickly say I want to very much thank Shri Natador and DERT. I spent the first 2 weeks of January in India attending a meeting. I don't know if you can see it here, but there was a meeting in Nagpur, India on exposomics and precision environmental health. Shri had arranged for me to give talks at Amity University, Osaka University. We actually met with the ambassador, Eric Garcetti, who is incredibly smart and is very interested in the work that we do at NIEHS, and especially addressing some of the exposomics challenges that they have across India. But we also had a chance to meet with leadership at the Council of Scientific and Industrial Research, the Indian Council of Medical Research, a Center for Chronic Disease Control. The whole concept of the exposome or precision environmental health is they haven't heard about these things. I was actually surprised they hadn't heard of the term exposome. So it's an opportunity for us to really get in there. There's a lot of interest and a lot of excitement of working collaboratively with scientists in the United States. So it'll be very exciting to see what we can put together in the future. Next slide. I think that's it. So thank you all. And I want to stop sharing the slides and let's open it for any questions or comments that you may have. Okay, Daryl, I see your hand is up.
Uh-oh. Yeah, thank you very much, Director. Yeah, I just wanted to thank you for the support from NIEHS regarding the East Palestine scenario. I'm here as a member of that committee working with Christian and Tom Burke and Maureen Litfield. Things are moving. It's a little bit different type of environmental justice community, but much more to come there. We are waiting on the president to sort of decide, about Friday, and then we'll have much more coming forward. And so thank you for that. Now,
actually, thank you, Daryl.
Well, some people workaholics.
This is a real community engagement, a real collaborative effort, and I'm just really pleased at how things are all kind of coming together as a all of government approach to helping the residents who have been impacted by this man-made disaster.
Yes, great. But what I really wanted to ask you about was where are we with respect to coming to some sort of agreement or getting on the same page as it relates to Pat Brennan, of course, before she left, we were talking with National Library of Medicine in terms of the infrastructure for, getting, integrating all of that with respect to the exposome and not reinventing the wheel with regard to some of those constructs that are there, operative and so forth. Has there been any progress there?
Oh, Daryl, there's been a lot of progress, lots of discussions around just generally data management across the NIH. And with the increasing interest in the exposome, we're not the only IC that's interested in the exposome. So there are lots of other, most notably, I think you heard from Richard Otis when he gave a presentation to all of them. The exposome is clearly something that's on their radar screen. Walter Koroshet's also very interested. He's dedicating part of his research program to actually getting out there and studying the exposome. So what's clear is that we have a lot of work to do to make sure that we can manage the data And that's an area of focus for Dr. Bertinelli. Now, there have been a lot of discussions. It's not quite ready for prime time, but I'm hoping that at one of my future updates to all of you and my council presentations, I'll be able to update with you on some of the things that are happening. But there's a general recognition that we need to do things differently in the way that we manage data. If we truly want to bring some of those powerful AI and ML tools to bear, and integrating the environmental health and exposomics data, we need to be thoughtful of how we do this. So it's not every IC taking it on by themselves. So we end up with 27 different exposomics databases.
Right.
Really thoughtfully kind of pulling this together so that we all can contribute in synergistic ways to the collection of this information. I think the efforts, and I don't know where Gary is here, but if Gary or David want to comment on the Banbury conference, I think that was a step in the right direction, is really figuring out, well, what is exposomics data? How do we manage this? And data collection and data management is well, at least the way I interpret this, is clearly a very important a component of operationalizing the exposome. Daryl, does that, so I can't give you the details yet, but rest assured this is prominently on both the Dr. Bertinelli and IC directors' radar screens. We're working through the details, and I hope to be able to update all of you the next time we meet.
Okay, great. I'm just, Gary, was there anything else you were going to add to that?
I think the Banbury conference did provide this sort of convening of multiple groups. Like, for example, NINDS is working on a working group thing to report back to their council. And David Jett, who's helping with that, was at the Banbury conference. And so I think the other institutes that are thinking about this are aware of these sort of efforts to coordinate and not duplicate the effort. And so I think that's what we're working on now, and trying to get, while we have this report from the Banbury meeting, we're also trying to get an academic manuscript out of that will give some additional promotion and from a high level impact paper. So more to come on that.
Lots of exciting planning going on, Daryl and Gary, and we're hoping that the funding this center will be nothing like putting a little money behind our intentions here. This collaborative effort, multiple ICs, you're really bringing together a center to really set the parameters of what are the technologies, how do we manage the data, and to do this in a way that we're coordinating it with the European Union. Carrie, I see that you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Wojcik. I really appreciated your assessment of the opportunities and the challenges faced by NIEHS right now. And I just wanted to note that many of the goals set in the strategic plan for examination of the exposome, the linking to community engagement and addressing their direct concerns, the management of data, and remediation of the most important routes of people being exposed to toxic compounds is covered in the Superfund research programs. The SRPs have been so responsive to the overall strategic goals that you describe. And so of course I'm disturbed to worry about the opportunities for continuing funding for this really gem of responsiveness to these needs. And I wonder if you could comment about your plan Bs.
Well, so I'm glad you brought that up. So the plan B is, well, first of all, is stay tuned. So we know what the House was suggesting, but that doesn't mean that that's the budget that will ultimately be passed. We have to wait to see what happens on March 8th. But, Carrie, I've been perplexed by this, because when I get out and I present this to Republicans, Democrats, House and Senate, the parameters, the things that we're doing with a pretty modest amount of money from Interior and the environment, it's a different pot of money than the House Labor HHS, the Labor HHS allocation. I've just been perplexed why there just isn't more support. So we're going to continue to pound the pavement and to give them the remarkable examples of what we're doing around getting in there and cleaning up Superfund sites, doing the type of research that's going to make a big impact on the quality of human life. So let's see what happens on March 8th. And but just rest assured that I will continue to do, and I will be engaging with many of you to help create the types of messaging so we can take to our appropriators and hopefully change the funding curve for the Superfund program.
Thank you.
Terry, does that answer your question?
Good enough. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, sorry, I just wish that I had a different answer, but we just have to continue to work the issue. I think that, you know, it is a different appropriation. So the most of the money that we get, you know, the 914 comes from the Labor HHS, which is one subcommittee of congressional appropriations, and the Superfund comes from Interior and the Environment. It's a different subcommittee. And I think that many of the programs from the Interior and the Environment are being, I don't want to see, well, I don't know what's the appropriate terminology to use, but maybe under greater scrutiny than some of the things under Labor HHS. So we'll just have to see how it turns out, but just rest assured that I will continue to pound the pavement. It's the things that we do for both Superfund and the worker training program. No one will argue about the incredible impact of both of those programs. So we just have to continue to reinforce the message. Okay, Trevor.
Rick, thank you so much.
We gotta be careful of which Trevor we're calling.
That's right. Rick, thank you so much for the update. I want to come back to the comments you made about the exposome. One of the biggest roadblocks I see moving forward in this area is actually getting exposure histories in the electronic health record. I'm sure this has been discussed multiple times. But also as a component of that, if people start using the All of Us Biobank, right, they're going to be doing sample analysis. And is there a way to put that information back in to the All of Us Biobank so people can make use of that data?
Well, Trevor, that's a great point. And it's just, I think as I mentioned in a previous, I think you brought this up before, if I remember correctly, maybe personally or in the group. It's a personal passion of mine. I mean, I just don't understand why my physician has never asked me where do I work, and what are some of the exposures that are likely to be associated with my place of employment. Of course, then maybe she knows what I do, but we've got to change that. You know, pediatricians have to ask parents, you know, where they work, where they live, and as a step of getting environmental exposures into the electronic health record. So David and where's Gary? So this is a very important part of the exposome. Any comments that either one of you want to make about this? Are you both as passionate about this as I am?
Yeah. So if I could just chime in a little bit. So one of the things that you touched on when you were discussing our efforts with the All of Us program is, you know, through this CLAD building out a data infrastructure to take, so it's not just gathering the residential and occupational history for the individual, but it's developing the data streams that will link to the vulnerability indexes, the toxic release inventories, the sets of data that may give more additional information about what exposures those individuals could have experienced in time and space historically. I also think that some of the conversation that we had yesterday around the epigenomics and epitranscriptomics also gives us some hope of being able to kind of bridge between, we know these things existed in the environment, we're measuring these things in these biological samples right now, but what were the exposures that happened 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, that we may not be able to measure that, you know, exposure analyte in a biological sample right now. So I think we're working this from several different angles simultaneously. And, you know, over the next several years, I think we'll be able to answer your question, Trevor.
Gary, do you want to add something? I bet you do. Yep.
Yeah, the idea that, you know, residential and occupational history are relatively easy to collect and could be in an EHR sort of situation. And I think the challenge is often physicians say, well, I don't know what to do with that. But the point is that if you know where people are and what kind of job they had, there's databases that we'll be able to link into that provide that information. And to David's point about like the sort of like historical aspect, you know, if you look at things like PFAS, we know from historically collected human samples that there's trends of some types that are going down and some types that are going up. Like, I do think that we can retrospectively analyze at a population scale how these trends are occurring from a combination of historical human samples that have been biobanked, and also from, you know, various records of use and things like pesticide usage maps and things. So I don't think we want to wait for physicians to say, well, I don't know what to do with it. It's more of like, just get the residential and occupational history and any other sort of factors they think may be there. And then we can work on putting all those pieces together.
So my comment that is worth thinking about is that many health systems, including us at the University of Pennsylvania, use the EPIC electronic health record. And, you know, I'm wondering if some top-down approach might also be useful to actually talk to health systems or the designers of EPIC to actually put the fields in that actually can be populated.
Yeah, Trevor, you're absolutely correct. And so it's all of us integrating data like this into the All of Us program is a step in the right direction. That's a research cohort. What we need to do is, and what I'm personally passionate about, is getting this into EPIC and other electronic health records. I mean, there are no fields right now where you can logically add this information. So hopefully, as we start integrating this into the All of Us program, and PEGS, starts getting this information out to clinicians, the data will be there, and then furthermore, that we within the community will help physicians to know, what do you do with the data? So I see that Tim has his hand up. I suspect that if you have some knowledge about certain types of pesticides in your electronic health record, that might help you in your diagnosis of Parkinson's and other diseases. But so Trevor, you raise a great point.
I would love to be able to take a good history for this kind of thing, but physicians, I think we discussed this at our last meeting, physicians have increasing demands on their time. We have 15 or 20 minutes per patient. And in my geriatric population, I can touch on a couple of their problems and can't take a detailed history. We have increasing demands for quality improvement initiatives, so other fields that we have to fill out. And I think that the clinical demands are just prohibitive right now. I don't know if Gopal wants to comment on this as well.
Yeah, I think we discussed this last time, Tim. There's really not time to do this. We do it because there are, one of the diseases that we deal with is interstitial lung disease, which can be environmentally driven. And when we try to do this environmental exposure work in the clinic, it takes time. It takes an additional 10 minutes. And as Tim said, we're given about 15 to 20 minutes to see a patient. It's impossible.
The other thing is, I agree with Gary that it'd be great to get these into EPIC top down. But EPIC is just such a monstrous program, and it's made for capturing billing efficiently rather than capturing medical information efficiently.
So I'm going to step in there. So the doctors and the physician shouldn't be collecting that information. Why isn't there a way in which we can capture that information from accounting records? I guarantee the hospital and the billings capturing where they live and what they do for an occupation. And so it's actually a collection and a gathering of that data and merging those data sets.
And I agree with Stefania. Yeah, that as currently constructed, the electronic medical record system is wrought with underrepresentation of equity inputs that's going to go into these large language learning models that are it's inevitable in the future, right? I think that's what Trevor was probably getting at in the total scope of things, because the Internet of Things in the future is going to be the sensor for all of this. But I'm probably getting a little ahead of the curve there. We'll save that for Trevor. but the other Trevor in the next talk. But yeah, we have our work cut out for us, Director, and I think we're headed right with the correct direction.
And I'd just like to say one other thing. So the exposome is a fantastic idea, but I'm going to be honest, the exposome's capturing urban populations. And when we look at those maps of populations that are most affected by environmental hazards and environmental injustices, there are rural populations. And currently we don't have the math, the statistics, or the reach and money to help those populations. I'm from a rural population. I totally understand what's going on in those areas. And we just, the whole definition of a rural population is less than 2,500 people. Nobody wants to do an environmental epidemiology study in those populations. And so we've got to be able to figure out how we can help those populations, which to me are the most affected by these environmental impacts.
Well, Steph, we now have Justice 40.
Yes.
Justice 40, low-income disadvantaged community benefits cost analyses
Yep.
that the EPA, the statutory authority now, that, covers rural and urban. And so, yeah, but we're at NAEHS today, so I get it.
Thank you, Daryl.
Okay.
Well, it's great to articulate these challenges. Jana, you also put in the chat box about the rural folks with the PO boxes. So we have to be able to capture those folks, and there are some very important exposures that happen on the farm and in rural communities that we absolutely have to capture. So, we need to start and then build on these capabilities, and then ultimately hoping that we have a more robust kind of implementation of operationalizing the exposome. So Gary, that's part of your challenge. And David, where's David? So David and Gary, it's more things that need to be done. I'm sure you're aware of that.
Yeah, and I think on the rural urban piece, I agree with the mapping part of that. That is a challenge, although people are looking at the rural areas. But again, if you get a blood sample from somebody, it doesn't matter where they live. Like, it tells a lot about their past exposures and current exposures. So from a mapping standpoint, there's definitely been an emphasis on the urban, but I think from the technology standpoint, like for something like All of Us, where there's good enrollment, urban and rural, that you will have that representation.
It's the collecting of the blood samples in those communities that is the biggest problem. There is no hospital, there is no clinic that's within 30 minutes of most of these people. They have to drive an hour and a half to a hospital or a clinic in these rural areas. And so even capturing that patient population, if you get 10% of that population, that's 200 people. Nobody wants to touch that data, Gary.
So
Well, that's a challenge. We got to take it on. And as I indicated in some of the areas of focus of our new NIH director, I mean, she's lived in one of those communities. She grew up in one of those communities. And so there's a personal passion there. We have to address that. We just simply have to address it. It's important.
So if I can interject, we are about 20 minutes over on this agenda item, and I know Trevor Archer has a hard stop at noon to go to a meeting with Dr. Burton Yoling. So if we could take Gokun fairly quickly, and then I will try to run through my presentation quickly.
I'll briefly comment on Steph's comment on what is available. Yes, EPIC will give us information about their current occupation and where they live, but you need to find out what they did in the past as well, and where they lived in the past as well. And then people have hobbies, people have birds, they do electronics. So there are things that are not going to be available just by looking at their occupation. There may be exposures through hobbies that you need to really ask. If you don't ask, you will not know.
Yeah, good point. Thank you, Gokun.
Well, I think, and Gary, David can correct me, but it's just remember what we're talking about a start to begin to collect environmental data. It's not the end all. And there's a lot that has to be done. It's just, I'm encouraged, and I really point to Gary and David and other members of the environmental health sciences community for reaching out and engaging others that are studying the etiology of human disease. I mean, as Tim knows very well, there are different environmental exposures that can be highly correlated with the development of certain neurological disorders, and we just have to bring greater awareness of that to the biomedical community and physicians who are treating patients with neurological disorders. David, I think, yeah, we are running over. It's good to get this feedback. I better turn it back over to you. So thanks everyone for your input. Turn it back over to you, Gary. Sorry, David. And so
Okay.
all yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Rick. So I will fairly quickly run through just some of the business and updates for what's been happening in DERT over the last 4 or 5 months since the September Advisory Council meeting. Do have some business that we need to cover this time as well. So we'll go through staff updates. We'll have the council delegated authorities discussion, which does require a vote from council in the electronic council book. So you may want to be getting that pulled up. I'm required every February to come and give a update on our fiscal 23 grant budget and where our investments went. I'll give an overview of our funding opportunities, what we have coming down the pike for solicitations in fiscal year 2024. I want to spend a little bit of time giving a very brief update on our activities following on the DEIA Council Work Group. If you recall the presentation last June from the Council Work Group, we want to come back and tell you some of the things that have been underway on that. And then just wrapping up with an overview of the workshops, grantee meetings that we've had since the September Council and those that are coming up this spring. So our staffing updates. The good news is we have more people coming in than we had leaving us this time, but we do have a few departures to announce to you today. The one is Dr. Melissa Smar, who has been with DERT since 2020 as a program officer in the population health branch. And really, this is a bit of a blow for us. Melissa has been heavily involved with our environmental justice, health disparities activities. And some of you may be aware that she actually did a detail throughout last year in the Department of Health and Human Services Office of Environmental Justice. She left us in December for a position as a program director at NCI in their Center to Reduce Cancer Health Disparities. A second departure was Michelle Voctolino, who is grants management specialist in the grants management branch, who had been with us since 2005. Who left us for a position in the Child Health and Human Development Institute. And then I want to also announce a pending departure, much as at the September Council a year ago, we announced the retirement of Pat Maston. Liz McNair has announced an intention to retire at the end of March of this year. And as you all know, Liz has been very heavily involved in working with council on our operations and logistics. What you may not be aware is that she has actually also been running almost all of our interactions with CSR. So she's had her hands on every solicitation that has come out of NAEHS for the past several years. She is heavily involved with our receipt and referral and review liaison activities. So she's been a great resource for NAEHS. She's an amazing person, and we wish her the very best as she moves into a new chapter of her life as she retires. Currently thinking in March, but we'll see if we can't convince her to stay a little bit longer. We do have several new staff and a few staff who have moved into new roles in the division. So first person I want to introduce you to is Michelle Campbell, who comes to us. So she'll be working as a health specialist in the population health branch, where she'll be heavily involved with our human subjects tracking activities, our clinical trials efforts, and human subjects policy enforcement and interpretation activities. She comes to us from Doug Bell's group in the Division of Intramural Research here at NAEHS in the Immunity, Inflammation, and Disease Laboratory. She came to us in September. We have two new members of the Grants Management Branch. The first I'd like to introduce you to is Chris Battle, who has come to us from the U.S. Department of Agriculture, where she was a loan specialist in the Rural Development Program. So I think that conversation we just had on rural populations, I think that is something that will resonate with Chris. Our second new grants management specialist is Francoise Stantos, who brings a wealth of experience, more than 15 years of operation in grants management across a number of sectors, from transit to hospital and healthcare to the university sector. And most recently, she comes to us from the Washington Area Metro program, Transit Authority, where she was managing construction projects for fiscal compliance. Our next new employee is Tiara Tucker, who joins us as a public health analyst in the program analysis branch. She comes to us from the Food and Drug Administration, where she was in the regulatory health program for the Center for Tobacco Policy. She has an extensive background in project management and evaluation, and she'll be working on a number of evaluations, in part the Climate Change and Health Program, and will also be supporting our activities in IT tool development in the division. Our last new employee since council is Dr. Ashley Vargas, who several of you have interacted with. She joined us in October as the Deputy Division Director. She is a registered dietitian, fellow of the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, also a molecular epidemiologist, and has been heavily involved in a number of programs. So she's been at the NIDDK, NCI, and the Office of the Director, and then came to us from the National Institute for Child Health and Human Development, where she was a program officer. And she brings just a wealth of perspectives and an attention to details that I think really complements my abilities as division director. And I'm super excited to have her as part of our team. And I have two staff members who've moved to new roles in the division. So just announcing their appointments. So the first is Michelle Heacock, who has assumed the role of the permanent branch chief for the hazardous substances research branch and director of the Superfund research program. Michelle has been at NAEHS since 2007, where she was a postdoc with Sam Wilson, and came to DERT in 2012 in the Superfund research program. She has, when Bill Sook retired, she moved into the role as acting branch chief at the end of February of 2023, and became the permanent branch chief at the end of September, so just after council. And also Sri Nadadur has been selected as the permanent branch chief for the Exposure Response and Technology branch, a role that he had been performing the duties of since I assumed the role of acting division director in May of 2022. He also joined DERT in 2007 as a program officer, and has since that time led our portfolio in air pollution pulmonary biology, and has also been heavily involved with our nanotechnology, inflammation, and our counteract activities. So congratulations to Michelle and Sri on their new roles. And then the final position, temporary staffing change that I would like to announce to you. Because of her, we don't typically announce details to council, but because Christy Drew has been heavily engaged with council, I thought it worthwhile. I also think that this is a significant opportunity for Christy and for NAEHS. As Rick mentioned, one of Dr. Burton Yoli's major points of emphasis is on IT tool development and data repositories. And Christy has been working on as part of a committee to do an assessment of IT tools across NIH in support of extramural business processes. And she's actually going to be taking, for the next 6 months, a detail into the Center for Information Technology at NIH, working with the Chief Information Officer on really building out that inventory and looking at opportunities to identify key features and functionalities of those tools, and opportunities to really harmonize and streamline those, so that rather than having 27 different ways of doing extramural functionality, we can have a single set of tools that will be useful across NIH. So we expect that this is going to result in several $1 million worth of financial savings and efficiencies for NIH. So Christy started that detail at the beginning of the month, and will be returning to us, I think, at the end of July, beginning of August. But I think that this is really a great opportunity for her and for NIEHS. One thing that you may not be aware of is that we have a long history at NIEHS of developing these tools and really rolling them out across NIH. So the publication search capabilities of the NIH Reporter is actually built on a system that was developed at NIEHS more than 20 years ago and rolled out across NIH. So with that, I'll move forward into our next topic, which is the Council Delegated Authorities discussion. So just a reminder, staff, this is a requirement that I bring this every year to discussion with Council. These are the Council operating procedures and a number of functionalities that Council delegates to NIEHS staff so that we can continue to do some grant actions in between Council meetings without having to bring some relatively simple things to Council for approval. So there are 5 sets of Council delegated staff actions. The first is the change of institution. So when a principal investigator moves with his their research project from one grantee organization to another, standard practice is that they move their grants with them. And the Council Delegated Authority allows our staff to review the appropriateness of that agreement and approve those. Likewise, sometimes when a principal investigator leaves an institution for various reasons, they do not move their grants with them. And the institution instead chooses to name an alternative principal investigator. So we ask Council to delegate the ability to approve that permanent change of principal investigator to us. The third set is the continuation of grant with an interim principal investigator. This is most typically done in the form of a sabbatical when a principal investigator goes on a sabbatical. There have also been some kind of extended healthcare the circumstances where there's been a desire to have an interim principal investigator, and we ask to have the ability to approve those. And then the last 2 are the extensions of grants, either without funds for projects under SNAP. This would be a second without no cost extension of a project, or for those that don't have automatic authority, this would include the first no cost extension. And then 5 is in relatively rare circumstances, we will seek to extend a project with additional funding to complete the activities of that grant as they are wrapping up their business, but they need additional resources. They no longer have sufficient unobligated balance to complete the work. So we're only proposing one change to the language of the Council delegated authorities. This was shared with Council in advance of the meeting, so they've had an opportunity to review the document. And this is something we should have caught a long time ago. But in that with cost extension discussion, the first term is an acknowledgement that the negotiation is actually with the grant recipient and not with the principal investigator. The grant awards are to the grantee institution and not to the individual principal investigator. So it's just correcting the language for that bullet. It doesn't. There's no effective change to the operating of that delegated authority. We're also proposing a couple changes to other parts of the council operating procedures. This is the NAEHS council review of grants. In the first term of that, outlines the basis for what projects will be brought to council in closed session for special council review of individual grant applications. We actually noticed an inconsistency with policy and practice that we have at NAEHS. There was a bullet included in there that brings a review of center grant applications to a special council review, as well as supplements. By policy, supplements no longer require council review, so that element is not appropriate to have in the special council review guidelines. And then we have been bringing our research center grants to en bloc actions, not to special council review of individual applications. So we're proposing to remove that bullet. We also had some circumstances that came up last year where a principal investigator moved from a domestic institution to a foreign institution and wanted to move their grant. And we found that NIH policy does require us to get council review of any change to a foreign entity from a domestic project. So we need to add a term to the SCR discussion to allow that, and also to be consistent if there were to be a circumstance, I don't know of this ever happening, where a grantee moved from one foreign grantee institution to a different foreign grantee institution, we would also need to bring that to council for a special consideration. And then our final element of edit to the council operations is in the guidelines for the early council concurrence using the electronic council book. So we bring a number of actions to council before the council meeting for their review and approval, so that we can as the first line of this goes, the purpose of the early concurrence is to expedite the award of meritorious grant applications. So just changing the language there from funding, it's actually the award of the applications that is the focus here. And then the final element is with the NIH continuing change of what is a funding opportunity. The standard language has changed from a funding opportunity announcement to a notice of funding opportunity, NOFO. We'll take selected notices of funding opportunity to council for early concurrence if there's a desire for us to be able to move those earlier and expedite those awards. So those are the changes that we are proposing to the council operating procedures and the council delegated authorities. So I'd now like to see if there's any council discussion of these items. And if not, call for a motion to approve the updated council delegated authorities.
Just very quickly, David, if I could.
Yes, sir.
It's always relative to that initial change regarding the award. Of course, it's always been made to the institution. However, we, that language, I'm not sure that I can recall, a change such as that you indicated. And so, what was the explanation for that? I mean, we all know.
So it's acknowledgement that the ultimately accountable party in the negotiation is the grantee institution, not the principal investigator themselves. We will, of course, confer with the principal investigator as well. But ultimately the request and approval negotiation is with the grantee institution, the recipient, not with the principal investigator.
Okay, so I just want to make sure I can use, instead of using nefarious, I can use dastardly in terms of that change. Okay, we're good.
It's just tightening up the language and acknowledging the policies. In terms of practice, it doesn't change anything. We'll still be negotiating with the institution and with the individual principal investigator. Are there any other questions or concerns from council? If not, may I call for a motion to approve the council operating procedures changes?
Motion to approve.
Thank you, Trevor.
Second.
And may I have a second? I'm sorry,
Yeah,
who was the second?
Second. Oh,
Thank you. And if council members could please vote in the electronic council book.
Where is it in the book, David?
Liz?
The council delegated authority is just below where you see David's presentation. It's listed there. Does everyone see that? Thank you.
I got it, yeah.
We have quorum.
Okay, thank you, Liz. And thank you, council members. So, excuse me, moving on with the overview of the 2023 funding. Again, this is something I'm required to do every February council. So here's the high level overview of our 2023. We received a total of 1,274 applications for review. This is a slight decrease from 2022, where we had just under 1,300 applications reviewed. We awarded 243 competing awards. Also, that's a slight decrease from 2022, where we made 250 competing awards. The rough balance between research project grants, other research programs, SBIR centers and training grants is roughly consistent. We'll dig into that a little bit more in the next slides. Our average cost of a research project grant was $535,000. That is a significant uptick from previous years, and I'll get into why that is in a few slides. We were able to maintain our 10% pay line for R01, R03, and R21 grants, as well as maintaining some raise to pay flexibility with that. And our success rate continues to be slightly below the NIH average. I think the NIH average last year was 18%. And we were 13.7% for R01s and just over 15% for all research project grants. Looking at the distribution, so our total extramural funding, this includes our climate change and health budget, but does not include the Superfund programs, the Interior and Environment Appropriation. We'll cover that in a few slides, or our TAPS, which is, as Rick alluded to, the money that we are required to pay to big NIH to oversee our extramural programs. As always, research project grants is the largest single bin of just under 300 million of the $444 million that we awarded. Centers is second. Our other research program is actually our third largest bin, and that did grow a fair amount last year, as did our centers investment, and we'll cover that in the next slide. Training and SBIR are fairly consistent at about 5% of our funding. The SBIR funding levels are congressionally mandated. So comparing 22 to 2023, You'll see our total amount of investment actually went up significantly from 395 million to 444. That is mostly due to the influx of funds for the Climate Change and Health Initiative. So you'll see the intake, the expansion of our centers line by $16 million for the Climate Change and Health P20 program. And not captured on here is that our other research also increased from our standard 8% to just over 10%. That's with the additional funding for the CAFE, Climate Change and Health Coordinating Center. Those projects were both multi-year funded. So the P20s and the coordinating center were multi-year funded. So they received 3 years of funding in fiscal year 2023. So the financial impact of those is quite a bit higher than if we were to be incrementally funding those. We also received approval from NIH. Well, I'll cover that in the next slide. So our total investment in RPG as a percentage of our overall budget did go down from 71% to 66%, but the total investment in RPGs actually did increase from 280 million to 294 million. This is just the reflection that the climate change and health budget that came in was steered specifically into the centers and other research categories. So looking at our distribution, this is focusing just on the research project grant category of funding. Again, the overwhelming majority of this is into our RO1 programs. So almost 80% of our RPGs are in RO1s, $227 million. And then just following down, our investments in R35, R21, R00, and other RPG mechanisms, relatively small portions of our budget. The percentage of R21 and small R, RO3s did increase a little bit last year because we received approval from NIH, across NIH, to multi-year fund the small R programs. And we did take advantage of that in fiscal year 2023 to decrease our non-competing commitment base for this year. So we accelerated some funding to lessen the impact of a potential tight budget in fiscal year 2024. And again, continuing consistent messaging, looking at again, this is for the research project grant budget. The majority of those funds are committed in the form of non-competing awards. These are the type 5s, mostly RO1s. So over 3/4 of our RPG budget is in non-competing awards. Mostly RO1s. We did have a $72 million budget for competing awards last year, which went to 15 solicited projects for $10 million and 120 unsolicited projects for $61 million. So looking at that competing research budget over time, our budget was roughly the same as for fiscal year 2022, 72 million versus 71.8 million. But as I mentioned earlier, our average cost of award rose from $450,000 to $567,000. That increased average cost of award was in part due to that changing NIH policy that allowed us to multi-year fund our smaller projects, but we also asked for and received approval from NIH for the ability to fund our raise to pay awards from June Council, our fourth quarter raise to pay awards as multi-year funded projects as well. So those roughly I think 7 or 8 raise to pay projects that we awarded in the fourth quarter were multi-year funded at 3 years funding rather than 1 year incremental. That gives us saved us almost $12 million for competing budget in fiscal year 2024 and 2025 by making that change. But it did have the end result of both decreasing the total number of awards that we made in fiscal 2023 and increasing the average cost of those awards. Looking at our RPG solicitations from 2023, we actually had a slightly lower number and budget for our solicited RPGs last year. So we only had 4 programs that we had funded as RPG solicitations. That's our time-sensitive R21 program, where we made a total of 4 awards for $1.5 million. Our ones, RO1, where we made 3 awards for $1.7 million. Our Victor program, 3 awards for $2.3 million, and our River program, where we made 5 awards for $3.7 million. So we did not have any one-off topically focused, scientifically driven programs in 2023. So just looking a little bit deeper dive into our pay line. Again, we were able to maintain our standard 10% pay line last year and flexibility to do raise to pays. So we did, our pay line last year was a slightly lower number of applications, 86 versus 97 in fiscal year 2022, and a slightly decreased budget. So that's just the number of applications and their cost to come in at the 10th percentile. We were able to make a number of raise to pays. We had a total of 24 raise to pay awards last year, down from 33 in fiscal 2022. But again, the average cost of those was significantly higher because of our ability to do the multi-year funding for those projects. Looking into the other aspects of our budget. Focusing outside of the RPG budget, our centers, we made 8 competing awards. That does include the awards that we made for the climate change and health P20s for a total of $57 million. We made 7 competing T32 awards, as well as 25 individual fellowship awards for a total investment of $23 million. We made 20 competing SBIR and 2 STTR awards for a total investment of $22.5 million. And our other programs, other research program includes both our career awards, where we made 21 competing awards, as well as the other research mechanisms, a number of different mechanisms here, with 26 competing awards made there. Looking at our Superfund appropriations, the story here, as Rick mentioned, is a story of continued flat operations. So there's no significant change in distribution here for the Superfund research program and the worker training program, our 2 interior environment appropriation. The majority of the funding for the SRP is in our P42 program, with smaller investments in our RO1, their small business programs. They also participate in the time-sensitive R21 program, and they do RO3s. And then for the worker training program, again, the vast majority of their investment is in the U45 worker training programs. And then they have their small business portfolio in the e-learning SBIR solicitation that competes annually. Then I'm going to present just a couple story of success on an initiative that we started several years ago on improving our timing of awards throughout the year. So the real focus here has been moving work out of the fourth quarter of the year. So if you look historically, we were going into the last quarter, so from July through the end of September, with about 2/3 of our work having been completed. And with efforts to try to move more work earlier, we've kind of gotten to the point where in 2023, we finished July with more than 80% of our grant awards out the door by the end of July. It was the first time we've been over 80% for the year, allowing us to get to 96% by the end of August, and again, 100% done by the end of September. The impact of this on the work that we do as an institute is tremendous. So 2023 was the first year that we did not have, not only did we not have our grants management staff working overtime to get awards out the door, staff were actually able to take family vacations in the summer for the first time, which is unprecedented for grants management staff to be able to take a summer vacation. So this is a huge testament to the work that we've done to improve our timing of awards. And just looking at throughout the year, kind of where we have gotten ourselves. So this is looking at the first quarter of awards, where historically we've had very few awards done in October and November. And we've gotten to the point where we're doing 5 to 10% of our awards in the first 2 months of the fiscal year, and getting to the point where we've done almost a quarter of our awards as we're moving into the beginning of the calendar year. This is probably functionally as fast as we will be able to do this work, given the realities of continuing resolutions and short-term allocations of awards. So this is limited more by us having funds in our bank account to issue awards than it is our ability to process the awards. And then closing up our look at the budget, focusing on our fiscal year 2024 funding opportunities announcements and things that are on the street now. So several of these you've already seen are ones awards, Victor, the Oceans and Human Health Program, the telomere program, and the psychiatric disorders. All were projects that were presented to October Council in September of 2023. This council round, we had our P30s and our U24s. U24s were October Council as well. Sorry, the data and metadata standards, RFA, and our return of results programs, and the small business neurodevelopment toxicity. All of those were February Council projects. And then we have the Exposome Coordinating Center that Rick mentioned, and will be going to June Council, and our time sensitive, we bring those applications to each council round. And so next topic that I want to cover is our DEI Council Work Group update. So if you recall, in February 2021, we formed a council work group on diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. Karen Vasquez agreed to chair that group. They went and worked for 2 years diligently, and last June they presented their recommendations as part of the open council meeting and our discussion for June Council of this year. The work group presented a number of recommendations which our staff have been digesting and working through. And I just wanted to very quickly bring a summary of kind of where we have been focusing our efforts since last June. So we binned them into a set of recommendations that frankly are not things that NAEHS has the ability to affect, But there are also things that NIH has already taken on responsibility for affecting. So this includes things like the unconscious bias training for reviewers and peer review, as well as staff. The anonymization of the peer review process, where CSR actually conducted a pilot test in 2023, and we're waiting additional information from Marie Bernard's group, the COSWAD, as well as the UNITE committees. And then COSWAD also developed a program for DEIA-focused mentoring in the broader community. And then there were a number of elements of the recommendations that required us to do some additional portfolio evaluation, and those activities are largely underway. This includes looking at our training programs, the Diversity F31 and the Mosaic K99R00 program, and their impact on our program, which anecdotally, I think we've seen a significant success of particularly the Mosaic K99s. Looking at our diversity supplement program and the effectiveness of our driven network, and then understanding the role of communities in our projects. As you know, we have a very active effort in community engaged research at NAEHS, so doing some evaluation of those activities. This last one, looking at the applicant and trainee race, ethnicity, and gender, this is data that NIH has, but because of its sensitivity and the rules around the use of that in decision making, we do not generally have access to that information. So we have submitted a request to NIH to receive this data historically, and we're awaiting NIH's approval so that we can come back and do this evaluation. And then there are a number of additional recommendations that we're looking to dig into, and we've actually hired a contractor specifically focused on some of these DEIA activities, both in relation to our extramural activities, as well as our internal division level efforts around DEIA. So this includes developing our own mentoring program for NIEHS applicants and investigators. Expansion of our driven network. This is our community of our recipients of our diversity supplements. Marketing of the loan repayment program, specifically to underrepresented minorities. There is a underrepresented minorities diversity focused loan repayment program. So we're looking to market that. Expanding our outreach to underserved minority groups such as SACNAS and APRICAMS, as well as engagements with SOT diversity activities, and then expanding our partnerships with our centers and HBCUs and minority serving institutions. So all of that is work that we're looking to ramp up and move forward with, and we'll come back in the future for additional status updates on our DEIA activities. I just wanted to make clear that we didn't just take your recommendations and put them on the shelf. We're actually moving forward with those activities. And then very quickly, just to wrap up, I wanted to give an overview of some of the things that we've been doing since our council meeting. Fall was a very busy time for us. We actually had a very large number of grantee meetings, mostly at NIEHS or in Bethesda. I do want to call attention to the complementary program meeting, which we held in October. So Rick alluded to the complementary program. We actually did a meeting in Bethesda at NIH in October, where we brought all of the federal agencies that are involved with new approach methodologies together and had a discussion of where interests are, where efforts are, so that this complementary program is not just advancing the science for NIH's purposes, but really advancing the impact of NAMs across the federal government. And then coming up for the spring between now and our June meeting. We have a number of additional grantee meetings that coming up, including a joint meeting of our Partnerships for Environmental Public Health and the Environmental Health Disparities Centers that Rick mentioned in his presentation. And I think Trevor will probably talk a little bit about as well. So that will be held here at NIEHS in our Rod Bell Auditorium later this month. And then we also have wanted to call attention to bringing back something that we used to do in DERT in the past, where we hold a scientifically focused retreat on an emerging topic of environmental health, where our staff come together with experts from the community to dig into some kind of emerging topics on things that we want to build our own scientific expertise and awareness of and discuss potential future directions. So we're doing a retreat at the beginning of March on precision environmental health. And I anticipate there may be some program development coming out of that meeting that you may see at a future council meeting in the form of concepts. With that, I will wrap up. I will say thank you all for your attention and see if we have any questions. Karen.
Hello. Yeah, first I'd like to thank you, David, for that very informative update. And I have a comment and a question. First of all, on behalf of the DEAI subcommittee and as the chair, we would like to thank you very much for the implementation. So the suggestions that we made, that was the easy part. It's easy to make suggestions, but implementation is tough, and we really very much appreciate that. I do have a question on it looked like, and I don't know if it was significant, but it looked like the number of applications, so maybe individual investigators, so maybe our ones, that they were down this year. And is that the case? Was it significant? And if so, do you have a reason for that? I mean, I know that there have been some issues with some researchers on the changes of study sections that aren't panning out so well for some of us. So it seems like maybe there would be more applications submitted, but that didn't seem to be the case.
Yeah, so we did have a very slight downtick in the total number of applications received. So from, I believe, don't quote me on this, I believe it was from 1,298 to 1,274 applications. I think that's probably within normal noise.
Okay.
But it is a little surprising, given the concerns that we've seen with study sections. So it is something that we're monitoring, and we are doing a deep dive analysis that we'll likely bring back to council in the not too distant future on impacts of some of the changes at CSR.
Yes.
On our.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
Yep. Trevor?
David, you didn't address this. I'm sure you're thinking about it. You know, there is a report from the Office of the Director on postdoctoral stipends and how it's going to get raised from a minimum of 56 to 70,000. And on a flat budget, I want to know what kind of planning you're thinking about to absorb this increase.
Yeah, so this is a very active discussion, as I'm sure you can imagine, across NIH. And we are anticipating that there will be guidance coming from NIH on how we should be moving with postdoctoral stipends and the impact that may have on funding levels. I'm not sure how much of that I'm at liberty to discuss right now, but there have been a number of alternative strategies proposed that are under consideration, as I'm sure you can imagine.
David, I'll just quickly add, Trevor, thanks for asking the question. This has been an area of an intense discussion and debate trying to manage this. This has a huge budgetary impact. Nothing to report yet, but rest assured the IC directors and our new NIH director are on top of this.
Okay, thank you, Ray.
Gary.
I want to see if there's any update on the ONES program. I hadn't seen the new RFA and I wasn't sure if there was a pause or anything like that.
Yeah, so we are putting a pause on ones right now. I'm doing some evaluation and looking at alternative strategies. There's a reality that while ones does bring with it a significant cachet, we initially developed that as an effort to increase our funding for early stage investigators. And there's a reality that we're funding 5 to 6 times as many early stage investigators through investigator initiated applications than we are through ones right now. So we're taking stock of what strategies can we use to nurture all of our early stage investigators, not just those ones that are successful through the ones program. So look to see something in the not distant future. But it is something that we're focusing on right now.
Actually, David, you might want to just expand a little bit more on this. I think we've heard from many investigators. The ones designation is not going away. It's just that the implementation of ones is different, and again, more details will be coming out.
Yeah, so I don't want to get too far into details before we've actually developed the concept for what it is that we want to do. So I think I'll resonate with you. Ones is not going away. Our commitment to early stage investigators is definitely not going away, and we'll be bringing something to council in the not distant future.